You are watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to another comic book review. This video was requested by Rabid Waffles, and as usual, his channel will be linked in the description and end screen. Today I am reviewing Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, the director's cut. This comic book was written by Jonan Vasquez, the guy who later went on to make Invader Zim. I honestly think this comic is better than Invader Zim. It's fucking awesome. It follows our main character Johnny, who, as the name implies, is a homicidal maniac. He's a serial killer who kidnaps people and tortures them to death. It's also kind of a satire on society, I feel, with Johnny's views towards society, and his reasons for doing what he does. Granted, there may or may not be supernatural elements involved, otherwise they may just be in Johnny's head. It's hard to say. As far as the characters, there's of course Johnny, and then there's Squee, his little neighbor boy, who he kind of torments by showing him all sorts of horrible shit. Then there's a bunch of other characters that come and go, and of course there's characters such as Devi, who Johnny goes on a date with and then tries to kill, and then kind of torments her through the rest of the series. But the most prominent character other than Johnny is probably Squee. Even though he's only in a couple of issues, Johnny does visit him a lot, and he did get his own spin-off comic, which I will read later on. There's one segment in this that I was a little bit skeptical of at first, called Happy Noodle Boy. This is a typical Happy Noodle Boy segment. Basically, it's a comic within the comic series that Johnny himself is writing. At first, I kind of hated Happy Noodle Boy because he just spouts a bunch of stupid shit and then gets shot pretty much all the time for most of the issues. However, he's grown on me quite a bit, and arguably the funniest joke, in my opinion, in this entire series comes from a Noodle Boy page. Let me find it real quick. Here it is. So through this entire strip, he tries to convince this lady that her husband that she's burying is actually not dead. And as you can see in the end, she believes him, and she's like, okay, I got him. Well, now what do I do? And he's like, nothing. He's dead. If you read it, it's actually very funny. Obviously, it's not as funny with me just showing it here, but it is fucking hilarious. Other prominent characters in this series, other than Squee and Johnny, are characters such as the Doughboys. The Doughboys are styrofoam little things that Johnny has that he talks to and talk back to him. Now, whether or not they're real or just in his head is kind of left open to interpretation. There's definitely evidence to support either one. There's also characters like Nail Bunny, which is just a dead rabbit that Johnny nailed to his wall. And Nail Bunny typically represents the good side of Johnny, whereas the Doughboys sort of represent different elements of his evil side. There's also the character of Anguish, which is a pun on Anguish, and she's just an angsty teenager, and she's only in a few strips, and she's completely unrelated to the story. I don't particularly like her, honestly. A nice thing about this Director's Cut edition is it includes early comics that Jonan did before he started the official Johnny the Homicidal Maniac story. Apparently, he's been drawing Johnny his whole life, so there's quite a lot of old sketches here. One thing I don't get, is there a significance to the Z? Is that an inside joke with Jonan, or is it just something he decided to do to make people ask that question? One thing that I don't like about this director's cut is it does not include the segments of Wobbly-Headed Bob, which apparently, according to Wikipedia, is another segment that ran along inside Johnny the Homicidal Maniac's main issues. They are, of course, unrelated to the story, but they are still part of the comic, so the fact that they're not in here is a little bit, iffy. Now, as to whether or not they're included in the Squee spin-off, I couldn't say, but I do intend to get it. There was also another spin-off called, I Feel Sick that's about Devi descending into madness as well. That didn't get a big book of it because I think it was only 1 or 2 issues. But if you're a fan of Invader Zim or like kind of random humor as well as some thought put into it, I definitely recommend checking this out. It's incredibly violent and kind of thoughtful at times, other times rather thoughtless. And I do feel that the ending kind of leaves something to be desired because it doesn't really end, it just kind of ends in, I won't spoil it, but there's not a whole lot of stuff that, it could easily be continued, and I do kind of like that, but I kind of wish they would continue it. I'd also really like to see a cartoon of this done. But anyway, that is my review of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. I hope you've enjoyed. This has been Fugitive Red-Eye, and you have a great day.
Subscribe to Fugitive Red-Eye.